Right now, the average new car payment in America is $770 a month. That is a record, the highest it has ever been. The average new car lease payment is $619. So the whole lease versus buy war that people agonize over in a dealership parking lot for 2 hours with a salesman hovering nearby comes down to a gap of $151 a month. And that gap is not the answer. It is the distraction, because this decision is not settled at the dealership. It is settled about 6 years later in a month you are not even thinking about yet. Most people never reach that month with a plan. They just sign again. So forget the sticker. Forget the salesman. Here is the real ledger 20 years long. You decide. Two people. Call them Chris and Dana. Same job, same income, same $45,000 car sitting in the same showroom. Same everything with exactly one difference. Chris leases. Dana buys. That's it. That's the only variable. Now watch what 20 years does to them. Start with Chris because on paper, Chris looks smart. He signs a 3-year lease. His payment is $619 a month. He puts about $2,500 down at signing, which the dealer calls due at signing. And you can call what it is. Money you do not get back. Here is what a lease actually is in plain English. You are not buying the car. You are renting the amount of value the car will lose while you are driving it. That loss has a name: depreciation. Depreciation is simply the gap between what a car is worth today and what it will be worth when you hand it back. And depreciation is brutal. According to Kelley Blue Book, the average new car built this year will hold on to only about 45% of its value after 5 years. A $50,000 car 5 years later is worth about $22,500. Half of it evaporates while you sit in traffic. So Chris is paying every month for the melting. 3 years pass. Chris hands back the keys. He owns nothing, which he knew. He signs a fresh lease, hands over another $2,500, and drives out in a brand new car that smells fantastic. He does that again, and again, and again. 20 years later, Chris has made 240 lease payments. At 619, that is 148,860. Add roughly $2,500 down every 3 years, 7 times over, and that is another $17,500. Chris has spent about $166,000. He owns 0 cars, 0 equity, nothing. And payment number 241 is due next month for the rest of his life. Now hold that number because it sounds worse than it is, and you will see why in a minute. First, Dana. Dana buys the same $45,000 car. She puts $3,000 down and finances the rest over 6 years at 7%. Her payment is $716 a month, which is $97 more than Chris pays. Every single month for 6 years, Dana feels poorer than Chris. That is the emotional cost of buying, and it is real. 6 years later, she makes her final payment. Total spent, including interest and the down payment, about $54,559. And then something happens that never happens to Chris. The payment stops. Her car is 6 years old. It runs. The warranty is gone, so she starts paying for her own brake pads and her own tires and eventually her own alternator. Call it $600 a year. Annoying, but survivable. And here is the move that decides the entire ledger. Dana keeps writing the $716 check. She just sends it somewhere else. Into a brokerage account every month automatically, like a car payment to her future. 4 years of that, and by year 10, she is sitting on about $30,500. Year 10, her old car is worth maybe $9,000. She trades it in, pulls $36,000 from the account, and buys the next $45,000 car outright. In cash, no loan, no interest, no signing ceremony. From that day forward, Dana never makes a car payment again. For the next 10 years, that $716 goes into the account, untouched month after month, compounding at about 7%. By year 20, Dana is holding roughly $131,000 in that account, plus a paid-off car worth about $9,000. Put the two ledgers side by side. Chris spent about $166,000 and owns nothing. Dana spent about $99,000 on cars and repairs and owns about $140,000 in assets. That is a swing of a little over $200,000. On the same car, in the same driveway, with the same income. $200,000 decided by one signature. So buying wins. Case closed. Right? No. And this is the part almost nobody says out loud. Go back and look at what actually created Dana's $200,000. It was not the buying. Read the ledger again. The buying gave her a paid-off car worth $9,000. That's it. That's the entire price for owning. The $131,000 came from one thing, and one thing only. She kept making the payment after the payment ended. Take that single behavior out of the story, and Dana's ledger collapses. If she pays off the car in year 6 and then simply enjoys the extra $716 a month, spends it on dinners, a nicer apartment, a vacation, then at year 20, Dana owns an old car and nothing else. Chris owns nothing and drove a brand new car for 2 decades. At that point, honestly, Chris had the better 20 years. This is what everyone gets wrong. They think the question is lease or buy. The question is actually what happens to the gap. And the uncomfortable truth is that most people never invest the gap. The car gets paid off, the payment disappears, life quietly expands to fill the space, and 6 months later they cannot tell you where the money went. That is not a math failure. That is a human one. So before you decide, be honest about which person you are. Now the lease deserves a fair hearing, so give it one. Chris never paid for a single repair. 20 years, never once stood in a service department being told the transmission is $4,200. Every car he drove was under warranty every day. Chris never sold a car, never listed one, never haggled, never got lowballed on a trade, and Chris was never underwater. That matters more than you think. When you owe more on a car than the car is worth, that is called negative equity. And in early 2026, nearly 1 in 3 trade-ins in America had it. Those people are not choosing between leasing and buying. They are rolling old debt into new debt and calling it a car payment. There is also a real case for leasing if you drive very few miles, if you need the car for a business, or if the technology in your car actually matters to your work. Leases come with a mileage cap, usually 10,000 to 12,000 miles a year. Go over it and you pay for every extra mile at the end. The average American drives about 13,500 miles a year. So for a lot of people, that cap is a slow leak. And here's the sentence to take out of all of this. The real enemy is not leasing and it is not buying. It is the permanent car payment. Because that is what most Americans actually have. Not a lease, not a loan, a subscription to a car forever that they renew every 3 or 4 years without ever once seeing the 20-year ledger. Look at the evidence. More than a third of new car loans in America now run longer than 6 years. Americans collectively owe $1.685 trillion on their cars. 6-year loans exist for one reason: to make an unaffordable payment feel affordable. So here's what to actually do, and it takes about 4 minutes. 1. Ask what your monthly payment would be, both ways on the same car. Write both numbers down. 2. Ask yourself honestly what happens the month the loan ends. If the answer is, I'd invest it, then buying is a powerful machine. If the answer is, I'd probably just spend it, then the machine does not exist and you should choose based on comfort, not math. 3. Whichever you choose, make it cheaper. A $45,000 car is a choice, not a law of nature. Every dollar you shave off the car is a dollar that goes to work for you for 20 years. You do not have to be Dana. You just have to know that Dana exists, because the average new car payment is now $770 a month, and everyone is arguing about that $151 gap on the sticker. The gap that actually matters is the one that opens up the day your payment ends. What you do in that gap is worth more than the car ever was. Subscribe for calm, no-hype money breakdowns every week.